We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Kuf Lamed Zayin, the halachot of Kriyat Torah, and we are up to Sif Hey and Daf Chaf Amud Bet of the regular prince of Mishna Berura, which Moran writes, and this is from Kolbo, brought in the Bet Yosef. Im kara parashat para upasak v'lager agar betocham v'galal sefer Torah. If he is doing parashat para and he stopped mid-reading by lager agar betocham and he rolled the sefer Torah, chozer upoteach matchil mirosh parasha ad titma'ad ha'ariv. He has to open it, begin from the beginning of the parasha, and read until where he should be reading, Titma'ad ha'ariv, umarech lefanea v'acharea, and you say bracha before and afterwards. Now, this of course is aligned with Maran being of the opinion that Parashat Para is the Oraita, and so on. It's very much timely parashiot, and says the Mishnah Berura v'galal sefer Torah v'arbe achronim hiskimu d'galal lav davka. Many achronim, many poskim are of the opinion that it's not necessarily dependent on whether or not you closed the sefer Torah, you rolled it closed, but it has to do with whether or not you said the bracha acharona, the bracha v'asher natan lanu, and if you haven't said it, again, this is aligned with what we said before, then you open it and you go back to where you were. You don't have to redo the whole thing. ואם לא ברח, אף על פי שקרא לספר תורה, חוזר וקורא את המותר בלא ברכה לפניה. You go back to where you ended by mistake, and from there you pick up and you finish until where you should, and then you say the bracha v'asher natan lanu, and that would be an easy fix without having to say the bracha and going to the beginning of the parasha. All of that is not necessary. Now, this is the shita of the Mishnah Berura, that if you said the bracha acharona, the bracha v'asher natan lanu, then when you go back, you say the bracha again. In the beginning, you say the whole parashat para, and then you say the bracha v'asher natan lanu again. That's the shita of Mishnah Berura. We already mentioned before that Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sofer in Kaf HaChaim disagrees with that because of Safek Brachot La'akel. And it says, in that case, even if you said the bracha acharona, the only bracha that you messed up is the bracha acharona, that you said it untimely, but you don't have to say bracha again in the beginning. Just go back without having to say bracha v'asher bachar banu in the beginning of the kriya because of Safek Brachot La'akel, and then you continue from there. Only if you close the Sefer Torah, you said the bracha, you took it back, whatever it is, then you realize that the mistake happened, then already is a siluk, then you have to say bracha again, but short of that, you don't say the first bracha. Again, consistent with what we said before. Merosha parasha, this you have to start from the beginning of the parasha, which again, this is according to Kaf HaChaim, when you closed it and ready to take back to the Aron, then you noticed the mistake. Why is it not enough? Asks Chafetz Chaim. Just open it and start from where you left off. Why do you have to go back to the beginning of Parashat Para? Says the Chafetz Chaim, because you changed from Takanat Chazal of what should be read. Therefore, it's as if you didn't read anything. It's enkan kri'ah. You didn't do what you're supposed to do. It's like having half a person. There's no such a thing as half a person, right? Half a parasha is not, well, you didn't do the takana of Chazal. So once you ended your ma'aseh, and the ma'aseh was not, takanat Chazal was not aligned with the takana, you have to go back to start it from scratch. Now the question is, when is it considered that you closed the chapter? So according to Shulchan Aruch, it's close the chapter if you rolled the Sefer Torah. According to Chafetz Chaim is when you said the bracha. According to Kaf HaChaim, because of Brachot La'akel, is when you are ready to take it back to the Aron. So it says the Mishnah Berura, ואף על פי כן הסכימו האחרונים דים דילג איזה פסוק אינו חוזר. Acharonim agree that if you skipped a pasuk, but you read basically the inyan, and the amount of psukim that had to be covered. Then you don't go back, because Parashat Para you're going to read anyways in the order of the reading of the Chumash. Therefore, one pasuk skipping is not necessarily a problem. Like we already discussed this before as well. Now, says the Mishnah Berura, וכמו לעיל בסעיף ג' לעניין פרשיות המועדים, אכן כל זה דווקא אם דילג מהפסוקים שאינם מעיקר חובת היום. You have to be careful, of course, if it's one of the main psukim that talks about the actual Parashat Para, not the side psukim added to it within the parasha, then of course you're missing one of the Evarim Shaneshama Truya Bahen. It's one of the psukim that the whole thing depends on. Of course, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the case that you skip the pasuk that's not relevant really to Parashat Para, the main inyan of Parashat Para, and yet it is included in Takarat Chazal. That's what we're talking about. But if you avalim dileg mikar chovat hayom, if you skip one of the main psukim, then the Mishnah Berura brings from Eliyahu Rabbah and others the choser, that you go back to say it again. The Mishnah Berura, we already discussed this before, says Maran in the next and the final if of this Siman, Hakore Batorah Rishon. If you are the one with the first aliyah, Vekara Sheni Mashkara Rishon, and the second person repeated what the first aliyah had already covered, Im hosif al mashkara rishon shlosha psukim. If you added, after finishing the aliyah that was read already for rishon, if you added 3 new psukim, or afilu shnayim b'makom de lo efshar, or at least 2, if it was not possible 3, at least 2, says the Shulchan Aruch, oto sheni ole min haminyan. Then the second person who got an aliyah is counted as the second aliyah. You have to have 7 aliyot, for instance, right? So this counts as 1. But if not, if you just read the same thing, or you read and you added 1 pasuk, Chazak u'Baruch, it's not considered a new aliyah. It's not considered, you gave 1 aliyah so far. So then, says the Shulchan Aruch, Eino ole min haminyan, chutz mi parei hachag mishum de lo efshar. Aside from parei hachag, that we say in, we repeat the same psukim for 2 people, and that's because it's not really possible to do it in any other way. In Chol HaMoed Sukkot, every day we go over parei hachag, and the way we do it is that the Revi'i, which is Chovat Hayom, just repeats everything that they have read, right? It goes back to what Kohen and Levi have said. So that's of course not a problem, because lo efshar, says the Mishnah Berura, mishum de lo efshar likro lefanav ma she'eno me'inyano shel yom, because you can't just decide to read something that's not for 2 days, and 2 days is only these psukim. You're very confined within what you could read on Chol HaMoed Sukkot. So therefore we have to divide it in such way that someone ends up saying the same exact psukim as other people and still is considered as a proper kriyah. And same would be if you have in regular Shabbat, Parashat HaShavua, that the Shishi by mistake read until the end of the parasha. People were so into it, nobody realized that they didn't stop by Mashlim. And you read until the end of the parasha, and say, this was Shishi. Now what are you going to do? Well, go to next week's parasha. If you already finished it, but you're missing 1 aliyah over here, right? You haven't given Mashlim to anybody yet. So in that case, it's the same thing, that you go back to Mashlim, to Shvi'i, and you read it, and it's considered you had no choice, basically. You're not expected to go read a parasha that's not 2 days parasha, and that would be fine as well. Now, the Mishnah Berura wrote that when you are dealing with a situation that's EFshar, that's not possible, that you can't read Shlosha, you can't give 3 aliyot and read for each one of them 3 psukim that nobody else has read. So says the Mishnah Berura, that's fine. And from the same reason, writes the Kaf HaChaim, and I read to you, Shim b'kriyah shel parashat hashavua, kara shishi, kim'at at sof parasha, that if the kriyah of regular Shabbat morning, the shishi read almost until the end of the parasha, and then they chap, then they notice that we're finishing the parasha. What's happening? This is shishi, not mashlim. And only 2 psukim have been left until the end of the parasha. Then, that's fine. You could have another person get an aliyah and read 3 psukim, including those 2, and that would be considered also a proper aliyah. This way, you have 3 psukim, 2 of them are new. That's considered also EFshar in that case. So, therefore, it comes out that if you have this mistake happen, and these things do happen, if you catch it right before the end, you don't say, oh, well, just let him finish. The best lachatchila would be stop it right there. If you have 2 psukim, have aliyah mashlim, get those 3 psukim, go 1 back. But if you finish the whole parasha, then you go back to mashlim, because again, that's considered you're being stuck without really any better option. Okay. Now there are minhagim that when you do parasha bechukotai, which contains the klalot, the 2 sets of klalot in the Torah, parashat bechukotai and parashat kitavo. So there are some communities that have a minhag. Mishnah Berura brings this in Sif Katan Yutet over here, right? That I'll read it to you. Ach yesh noagim beparashat bechukotai korin le'oleh tochacha shlosha psukim, says the Mishnah Berura. There are those who have this minhag that the one that gets the aliyah of klalot, they read 3 psukim prior, which is good. It's a good topic, right? Shlosha psukim kodem. You don't want to start with klalot. You want to start with something good. So they read 3 psukim of good before they start the aliyah. So says the Mishnah Berura over here, Af shkvar kara shlishi otana psukim. Even though that the shlishi already read those psukim, so you go back to those psukim because you don't want to start with klalot with this aliyah. And the Ben Ish Chai writes in his Shelot Utshuvot Rav Pe'alim that the minhag in Baghdad also was like this. They didn't want to start with something negative. So always you want to start with the good, finish with good. You don't want to start or end in a negative note. So therefore it says, because the minhag is like that, and they give an aliyah and they go back 3 psukim for the shlishi, the reason he says for it is that those 3 psukim that they don't have a stop before them, right? That the shlishi reads from those psukim, he doesn't stop, and those are the psukim of bracha, and you read them twice. In other words, says the Ben Ish Chai, why don't you just stop shlishi 3 psukim before? Sorry, the sheni 3 psukim before, and the shlishi would get from those psukim. Why do you have to read them twice? Right? In other words, if you're going to start the klalot 3 psukim into the good before you start the klalot, so just end the previous aliyah there. Why do you have to go 3 psukim and then go back for the next aliyah? So the Ben Ish Chai, because these are psukim of bracha, they're beautiful psukim. You don't want to stop in the middle of the bracha, and they're chaviv, so people want to listen to both two times. It's not considered a ba'aya. You don't have to change to be too much chacham, right? To stop it, you read, you finish the brachot, and then you go back 3 psukim for the next aliyah, and that is just fine. There's no reason to change that, and therefore you could do it, no problem, says the Ben Ish Chai. So now we are up to Siman Kuf Lamed Chet. Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue the next Siman in the days to come. Chazak u'Berura.